I'm the person who has seen this show before.
I'm a person who's never watched an anime.
HiroBabble, we are HiroBabble. HiroBabble, we are HiroBabble. Hey, hello and welcome back to the HiroBabble podcast. I'm your host, Michael.
And I'm your co-host, Spencer.
And today, we're jumping into lucky number episode 7, aptly titled, A Human Work.
A human work.
A human work.
Yeah, I read that and I was like,
What a name.
Yeah.
You know?
Brilliant.
But, yeah, so, I mean, outside of some housekeeping things, you know, we've just been really honored and thankful for everyone that's even given us a listen. Even if you checked out episode 1, maybe wasn't your thing, hey, thanks for giving us, your time, because we know it's valuable. And if you're sticking with us this far, thanks for being here. Just a quick little stat update. We have a unique audience of about 15 members. And not only do we have listeners in the Philippines, but Canada, and across all platforms, we've got over 200 listens. And I don't know about you, Spencer, but 200? Woo-hoo-hoo!
That's pretty good, man. I'm excited about that.
Now we're cooking with gas.
Yes, we are.
Anyways, today's episode's brought to you by... Kidding. But hopefully not for long.
Hopefully.
That could be cool. But either way, just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much for tuning in and checking out, our thoughts on Evangelion every week. We've been having a blast getting to just, shoot the shit and give our not so hot takes, but... or our spicy theories, which, by the way, if you haven't heard Spencer's theory from episode 5, you better go give it a listen and see how on the money he is if you've listened to it before or watched Evangelion, or if you're a newbie and you think it's worth its salt. Let us know in the comment section down below.
Yeah, that's a good point, Freddie. Maybe it's worth mentioning at the top of the show.
Oh, yeah. Why not just say it, know, while they're here?
Exactly. If you guys want to reach out to us, let us know how you're feeling. Let us know what your theories are. You can reach out to us at HiroBabble@gmail.com. You can reach out to us in the comments at Facebook, YouTube,
Twitter. We
Twitter.
do have a Twitter, and we've got 2 followers. Shout out to those 2.
It's not me.
It's not me.
We also have Apple Podcasts. You guys can leave reviews, and we'll definitely read those.
And on Google Podcasts and Spotify, you can just listen. Keep your thoughts.
Keep your thoughts to yourselves on those platforms.
But yeah, again, thanks so much for checking it out. And without further ado, let's talk about episode 7. And just right off the rip, what are your snapshot takes? What did you think of episode 7, just as a cursory glance?
Yeah, there's a definite tone shift in this one. We start getting a little bit more devious. We start finding out, it's tough to say that these episodes necessarily would give more answers, maybe in a couple spots, but they definitely lend credence to the mystery behind Gendo and, a lot of what Nerve is, who the angels are. That whole kind of rigmarole of what the hell's happening that continuously goes through my brain.
Yeah, it really is a spoon feeding of, you can have one answer as a treat, but here's 30 questions. And
yeah, I kind of felt like a couple times in this episode they give you an answer, but you're kind of like, that's not the real answer.
No. I know you're trying to trick me, mister.
Yeah.
That's me to Gendo. Just saying, I don't know about that. And then he's like, shut up, Shinji. And then,
Sorry.
Your impression stays unmatched.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I agree. I think this episode could probably be... like, if you were to just read the description of the episode, you would think, oh, this is a exposition dump. This is where they're gonna,
right.
Finally explain everything. Nope. Because instead what happens is you basically get to watch a nuclear reactor almost explode.
Yeah, pretty much.
But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Meaning not we, I said it. But either way, I think it's really interesting how the beginning of this episode opens up with this almost kind of ominous top-down shot of Tokyo 3, and you look at the NERV headquarters, and then it just cuts to Gendo sitting in this room that has what essentially amounts to these, like, spiritual circles on the ceiling and the floor. Like he's about to just, perform a seance.
Yeah, well, they kind of show a pyramid sort of object. I don't know if that's his office or what, but it gives me the idea like he's just created his office in some sort of, rescued pyramid.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Well, and then it's just interesting. It goes from this ominous, thing where he goes, special project, and he's listening to this person on the phone say, don't worry about it. We're well on our way to getting, the funds we need, and classic nefarious jargon where they're like, don't worry about it. We got the dough for you know what I mean. And he's like, yes.
Yeah, of course, the dough for pizza time. It's crazy. Like, you kind of in your back of your head feel like Gendo is this mastermind, and then he starts the conversation off. At least in the Netflix dub that I was listening to, he starts the episode off by saying, "I'm indebted to you," to whoever he's talking to, like his informant, who's given him this dossier or whatever that they're kind of combing through together over the phone. The fact that Gendo would be indebted to anybody tells me that there's some deeper things happening here than I expected.
Which is cool because it's a slight tip of the hand of exactly like you're saying, just how deep does this whole thing go, and what exactly, what exactly is the bigger picture? And I think for the longest time, it's been framed as, we're here to save humanity, and that's how NERV has been framed. But now you're, like, just in this opening shot, and not just this, but in prior episodes, they give you these little peaks, at Gendo, and you can tell that there are some cogs turning behind closed doors that we're kind of getting a peek at.
I remember it was either episode 2 or 3. It had that scene with like it was like a hologram kind of like Zoom meeting.
The round table. Yeah.
And there was like a bunch of other like stockholders or some sort of business people talking to him, and they gave you zero context. They just gave you like the end of a really intelligent conversation and then cut you off.
Yep.
And that kind of tipped you off that there was something going on. But, this informant, he mentions a few things that they just kind of whet your appetite with.
Yeah.
He mentions this Freedom of Information Act.
Yep.
And, like, somehow through that, he was able to acquire blah, blah, blah. And he gave some sort of false tips to this other company that... It's this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's just funny because that's, in real life, not anime world, FOIA requests are run-of-the-mill, requests by journalists, news organizations.
Yeah.
Or, frankly, anyone can put in a FOIA request to get an idea of, internal documents, things like that, projects that maybe aren't shown to the public. And it's just so funny hearing them brazenly go, yeah, I just kind of, like, forged it. I sent them on, a trail of the opposite direction. When it, and when in reality, NERV receives a lot of government funding. So it's just this funny game of cat and mouse where, and it just lends credence to the whole, we're up to no good.
You kind of learn in this episode that they not only get a bunch of, like, Japanese government funding, but they get a lot of, like, United Nations global funding for this effort. And so to hear them sort of talk about, like, hey... essentially the dossier is this other company that's creating a humanity-saving mech. Yeah. Right? And they kind of are like, okay, so stick to the plan? Yeah, stick to the plan. Like, they're going to somehow, derail their plan.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, too. One thing I love about this episode is they show you kind of the bigger picture globally. A lot of the time, I feel like anime hones in on Japan. If it's set in Japan, it's probably not going to leave Japan. But what I really enjoy is their, just kind of, so the whole world is going through this, and that really frames NERV in an even bigger light because they currently have a monopoly on the only proven methods to kill the angels. And so it would make sense. They, they got to go talking to this dossier.
Yeah.
Hey, whack a couple of kneecaps. You've been coming around the wrong block, jabroni.
Well, if you remember, I forget which episode it was. It was one of our last couple episodes, but I had a theory that basically Gendo is creating the threat to fund his business ideas. Mm-hmm. And I think this somewhat proves, this doesn't totally disprove that, but it does prove that Gendo is involved in the success of Nerve.
Yeah.
And he wants to ensure that, yes, they need to save the world, but it's going to be through his company.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
And even in just, like, this is foreshadowing, but, as you learn later in this episode, when they kind of sprinkle in info about the second impact and, its broader implications and the lengths Nerve has gone to downplay what actually happened. Ooh, really makes you wonder, what's the big plan here, boss man?
Yeah, there's a lot of... I mean, we'll get to it, but there's a lot of stuff where this episode shows you that, Ritsuko... Like, she knows more than she's letting on, that she's involved in a lot of
this episode really is kind of, like, framed, for me at least, in a different light entirely.
Right.
But I love the train that we're on, but we'll get there before we leave the station.
No, I appreciated the kind of 007 start to this.
Well, and it's nice, too, because when I first watched this episode... I was going in thinking, okay, is this going to be like an exposition dump episode where they kind of play catch up to go, we haven't really talked about the story. But in this entire second watch through, they do a great job of, kind of like you're saying, whetting the appetite, giving you these little things to chew on and process, and then offhandedly throwing like, oh yeah, anyways, second impact was a conspiracy or whatever. Like,
right.
Just these little things where you go, what?
Yeah, they're kind of like, oh yeah, that's what you heard in your textbooks, Shinji.
Yeah.
This is what really happened.
Well, speaking of Shinji, what a nice... it was so great to see him and Pen Pen just enjoying like a nice breakfast. I think it's one of the first times we've seen Shinji just like kind of stoked to be like existing.
Yeah.
Because for the past couple episodes, it's been existential dread and...
Yeah.
The weight of the world on his shoulders, and now he's like, bread.
Yeah, I mean, there is a definite, I think, confidence boost in him after the two Ray episodes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
There's, like, some camaraderie there where maybe he's, like, not only does he now have a couple friends at school, but he might be kind of excited to continue his work.
Yeah.
Well,
and speaking of camaraderie, I mean, you get to see... Him and Misato's relationship is very interesting to me, because you watch this... progression of episode 1, Misato's like, yeah, he's my responsibility or whatever. Mm-hmm. But now there's like a genuine banter that they share, and I think that it extends beyond this idea of like, he's my job or whatever. And it's actually like, and also Shinji has no problem calling Misato out on her various quirks, if you will.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean she's a slob.
Right. Well, we kind of already knew that. Like, we've seen the apartment in the past where it's just covered in trash and beer cans and her bed's never made and... You know what I mean?
But it's just funny to hear Shinji really lay into her about it.
Like, it's starting to bother him.
As she's, like, slamming a beer at 8 a.m., which, hey, I think we've all been there.
We've all been there.
We've all been there, maybe not every day.
And then she justifies it. She's like, hey, they used to drink sake every morning with miso soup and rice. I mean, like, this is trivial. And he's like, yeah, maybe you did that.
Yeah, it was honestly, the opening scene of them having breakfast is great. And then it cuts to, like... The banter continues, and then it shifts to his classmates Kensuke and Toji coming over.
Right.
Which I feel like they're very reminiscent of us in the early episodes talking about Misato, where they're like, is she in there?
I know.
What's up?
What does she wear in the morning?
Yeah. Shinji, dude, you're living with a babe? And that's a quote, by the way. I just want to throw that out there for any listeners at home. But in this introduction of like Kensuke and Toji coming over, this is when Shinji makes his final like little banter, and we notice that there's a difference in the Netflix dub versus what's in the like original anime dub. That because we're, for a refresher, we're watching the separate dubs of this show, but Shinji says something along the lines of "in mine," where he's like, you know, like, "Are you ever gonna answer the door decent?" or something like that.
Right.
Or it's like, it's unbecoming to answer the door like that, and she's just wearing like her pajamas.
Yeah.
And then what do they say in yours?
mine? He says like pretty much like, would you mind greeting them? Oh man, I forget exactly what he says, but he's pretty much just like, would you mind greeting them when you're not underdressed?
Yeah. So it's, I don't know, same but different, but enough so where it's kind of like, interesting.
Yeah.
Another key moment, too, that I totally glossed over. What did you think of Misato making the comment to Shinji about the parent-teacher conference where she goes,
Yeah.
you know, it's part of my job. And then Shinji just kind of says, oh, so it's part of your job, huh? Like,
is that along the lines of what they said in yours?
That's how they say it in mine. Misato's like, well, of course, it's your parent-teacher conference, you know. It's part of my job, you know. And then Shinji, as he's washing his dishes, is like, oh, so it's part of your job, huh? And I feel like that line kind of pulled the wind out of his sails a little bit, because they have this camaraderie banter. And then it's like just a little reminder that, like, well, I guess we're not like true friends. You know, she is my,
Sure.
she's the captain.
I kind of read that differently. My version's a little bit different. She says, he says, so are you really going to come to school with me? And she goes, well, it's part of my work, right? And he goes, yeah, part of your work. Like,
Okay.
I don't know. It kind of made me feel like Shinji feels bad there because he kind of realizes that he's just kind of like a project to her.
Yeah.
And that kind of reminded him that even though they've had this like kind of fun, snarky morning, and like they've really kind of broken ground as just pals, that at the end of the day, like, he's only there because she needs him as means to an end.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
I thought it was kind of sad. The line, it was kind of sad. It did dishearten him a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of what I took away from it too. Just kind of the idea of like, oh, just part of your job, huh? Like,
yeah.
Maybe say because you want to go, or because, you know, what do you think, huh?
Right.
But like, the brevity of that scene doesn't get much time to breathe, because then it cuts to Toji and Kensuke just going, Misato, like,
Yep.
whoa, dude. Just classic middle schoolers about it, where they're like, so Shinji, like, what's it like? And he's like, she's a slob. And they're like, oh, who cares, dude? Look at her. And he's like, no, she sucks to live with. Nah, you know, who cares? Come on.
You're so lucky, dude.
And he's like, I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Well, and then it cuts to him at school looking out the window at is that the fourth angel? From Ray 1 and 2,
It's the cube on the on its axis is what we just decided
Yes.
it was. It's a cube on its axis.
What was that, 4 or 5? I think that was the fourth angel.
That is what they called the fifth angel, but that's the third one that we see in the show.
Okay, got it. Because, I don't know, just like staring out at the wreckage of all of that, and you see these cranes like rebuilding the city, which is then just also not much room to breathe because Misato Tokyo drifts into a parking spot.
I couldn't remember, is this car, didn't she have a blue car before that she crashed, so now she
did.
has a red car?
Yeah, and this is the red one. But also Kensuke and that damn video camera, dude.
I love him.
He's great. I have some comments about him in episode 8 because
I call him Reporter Kid for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, he really is a good stand-in character that allows you, the viewer, to kind of imprint, or like gather knowledge, because he's like, "Wow, look at this," and then he lists off the model, like lists it, what it does, and how it operates.
Right.
Anyways, and you're like, "Oh, thank God for him." But yeah, I don't know, Misato stepping out in this, like, you know, it's parent-teacher conference day.
Short skirt, high heels, long legs.
And then Kensuke and Toji are like, humana. And then they slap Shinji on the back because Shinji's like, oh, brother. And they're like, grow up, dude. And then
I forget what they tell him. They're like, okay, you handle saving the citizens in a mech, and we'll take care of Misato.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, dang, Shinji, you really got the raw deal there, but it almost sounds like he'd prefer it.
He would prefer it.
Yeah.
You could tell he would prefer that.
So then it cuts to, and we already kind of touched on this earlier, but it cuts to Shinji reading this confidential report, and he's on an elevator with Ritsuko Misato, himself, and two of the control center people.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically are kind of, this is pretty much, in anime, there are what I like to call exposition dumps, where, kind of like I said, they take a set amount of time to catch you up on the world, what it's about, so that way they can progress on to the next scene.
Right.
But here, it's just an elevator ride. And in that elevator ride, you learn that they created conspiracy theories and said that the second impact was created by an asteroid hitting the Earth. What you learned in your textbooks is completely wrong.
Yeah.
We actually found the first angel, and it blew up. And that's why that was the first impact.
Right.
And so that was the second impact, sorry. Or was it?
Well, if you remember, like, I forget, it's like the first episode or second episode, the first time that Shinji goes to school.
Third
episode. So the teacher is sort of, Shinji's like insta-messaging this chick that he's a Ava pilot.
She's like, is it true? And he's
Right.
like, yeah.
And like,
almost died.
underneath it all, the teacher is explaining the textbook version
Yeah.
of this, where like the second impact is the meteor
Yep.
colliding in Antarctica or whatever.
Yeah, and then that's when the angels started coming.
Right.
Like,
And my theory at the time was, well, these angels are aliens.
Yeah.
And they got here from these meteor attacks.
but now it sounds like with the true traditional, okay, I have it in my notes, and I also should just remember it, but second impact was caused by the first angel they discovered blowing up. And it really makes you wonder, and I'm pitching this from your theory that they're aliens then, if they consequently started to come after the first angel blew up, what was taken away from the first angel? Like, what happened? Because we've seen little tidbits of that ice-covered hill.
Yep.
And, wow, like, what's going on? And, like, they all talk about that discovery.
Yeah.
But
I wouldn't say that that's my theory anymore.
Okay.
Once Ritsuko explained that, the closeness and the DNA between the angels and the humans, that kind of defunct my alien idea. And more so now makes me realize that these are created here and there's some sort of difference that's caused them to be enemies.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So exactly. They talk about we discover a humanoid being in Antarctica,
Mm-hmm.
and it explodes, causing this impact.
Yeah.
Right. That changes the world forever.
Well, and so then it cuts from that elevator exposition to Gendo on a plane with a guy who we haven't, met before. But on the screen on the plane, they're talking about how, all the other countries have agreed, like, to the funding request, except the United States. And then Gendo makes a comment, are they allergic to unemployment?
Yeah.
Not in today's economy. But it's essentially undercut by the guy on the screen saying, they'll come around. That's, like, they have no choice. But you also see that in this ship, they're floating above, essentially, the stratosphere. And you look down, and in the ocean, you see this giant red circle. And it's like, interesting. But then the guy basically goes, yeah, you have all of Germany's support. And they make reference to another Ava unit, Ava 2. And so it's like, oh, well. There's more of them?
Yeah. Now they start mentioning this Phase 2 project and the second Ava unit and all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
We've kind of heard that, like, the first Ava units were kind of these prototype units.
Yeah.
And so, the fact that I didn't even realize they were building another one. So this was kind of a big reveal there.
Well,
so the scene in the ocean, because I took that as that red, like, cloud storm thing that we see is what's left of Antarctica.
ooh.
I took that as, like, that's the second impact. Because they go from talking about that to that shot to inside the plane. And I was kind of thinking that maybe that's what that is. I could be completely wrong. It could be foreshadowing, but...
That's a good theory. a game theory. Thanks for watching. This episode brought to you by MatPap. Just kidding. But yeah, that's a really good theory. I will not comment on that, but I like that that's where your brain went to. I also like that following this kind of conversation from the elevator to the plane to the escalator, cuts to the next morning, you have the same, like the toast pops up, Shinji and Pen are eating.
Right. The scene was so charming we get to see it like 3 times.
Yeah, and then Misato walks out, but she's wearing like traditional formal like attire.
Yeah, Shinji's in shock.
Yeah, he's like, oh, okay, you didn't have to take it that seriously.
Yeah.
But then it cuts to Misato and Ritsuko flying out to this showcase that essentially is covering the new Jet Alone. Dumb name.
Wait, that's what in this?
Yeah.
This like meeting that they're having that's what they call it?
That's the name of the mech, the Jet Alone.
Oh, I never caught that.
Yeah, it is the dumbest name. Ava is so dope. Already
the idea is that it's there's no human needed to run it.
Yeah, they can completely remote control it, but it's powered by a nuclear reactor.
Right.
And so understandably, Ritsuko, the lead scientist of NERV, like she's at the forefront of what is essentially groundbreaking technology, but the stuff that's been saving humanity as of late. And so, she steps up and she goes, "Hey, a nuclear reactor, don't you think
Have we thought about this?
Yeah, like if it goes south, don't you think that this is going to just obliterate whatever's near it, especially with hand-to-hand combat?" And he's like, you mean obliterate it like Ava obliterated Japan?
I know.
And how like it's, the Ava goes berserk like women. And
shows like the most grainy photo ever of berserk Ava, and it's just like
it's like the Ava like yelling.
Yeah.
And then he makes that comment where he goes, we don't need, mobile suits that like go emotional like women. And everyone is like, and what's really striking to me is Ritsuko, like she holds her composure. She's like, hey, kind of a dumb idea. And then you can tell at the end after this guy is basically kind of laughing in her face, her furrowed brow. Meanwhile, Misato is at the table going, God, can you guys stop bickering already? Kind of acting like she doesn't care. Cuts to the next scene. She's kicking the door in on a locker and is freaking out. And then it cuts to Ritsuko and she's going, yeah, whatever. And she burns the dossier on the Jet Alone.
The scene is really smart and like really funny at the same time. Like,
absolutely.
The banter between this total fucking prick guy from the shitty name company and her just have this incredible banter where she's giving like all like really honest criticism.
Yeah.
And he's responding with like these like flippant remarks like, yeah, well, isn't it safer than your shitty program?
Yeah.
And she's like, no.
Well, and she raises valid questions where she goes, what if you can't shut it down? What if you can't control it?
Right.
And he's like, we've tested all of that, bitch.
He kind of has this response to her like, okay, but you think like humans and like their compassion can save this? And she's like, yeah.
Cause we've been doing it, bitch.
Yeah, cause it's happened.
Yeah, and it's happened multiple times. But one thing I never noticed when I first watching it, when I first watched this episode, I never noticed the parallel of basically Misato and Ritsuko switching places with their demeanor about the situation.
They actually have repeating lines in my dub. When Ritsuko is talking to the prick on the stage, Misato goes, "Oh, you're making a scene."
Yeah.
And then when Misato's kicking the locker, Ritsuko goes, you're making a scene.
Okay, that's I think the first time you've said a Netflix dub line where I go, okay, that makes sense. A lot of sense. And I kind of like it better because I think Ritsuko in my dub was like, just forget about it.
Right.
One thing, did you catch the transition from that scene where they're in like their dressing room or whatever, and then it cuts to the beginning of the Jet alone, like beginning its startup sequence, like the code.
Yeah, where somebody's like hacking it and deletes.
Where it's green, hacked, and then it's orange.
It's deleted. Yeah, I saw that. That was really cool.
Yeah. And that's, I think, just a real trademark of this show. It's those little details. They don't need to have them, but they do. And especially for me rewatching this, like, on my first watch through, I didn't catch it. On my second watch through, I picked up a few things. And I noticed that code switch, but I think I just find myself going, huh, okay. What a nice touch. Especially with, with all of the big and bombastic stuff that happens. It's just nice that there still is that attention to detail there.
Yeah, well, it's it just completes the whole story, even though it's like a blink and you'll miss it moment.
Yeah.
It's, if you don't miss it, it's really good foreshadowing. That you don't really understand what's happening until it completes that like story beat later, and then you're like, oh,
yeah,
I know what was happening there. Yeah.
Well, and so then, to no surprise, just as Ritsuko said, the jet alone goes haywire.
Right, it goes AWOL.
Everything goes to shit. The control center people are like, we can't get a hold of it. And then they're like, use the failsafe. We can't use the failsafe. Use the emergency failsafe. It's not working. And it's just this laundry list of everything they had as a backup has gone to shit.
Right.
But Misato says probably one of my favorite lines, and I don't know if he wrote it down, but I'm curious what they said in the dub. Misato essentially kind of takes control of the situation and goes, all right, we've got to figure out what we can do. She asks the guy, like, hey, how do we shut this thing down? And he's like, there's a code that we can enter that'll wipe every program this thing has.
Yep.
But he's like, I need approval to get it. And plus, we can't even get into it. There's a manual hatch, and like, what are we going to do against that thing? And Misato goes, acts of men are better than acts of God. And I'm just like, ooh, what?
Yeah.
What a line.
Definitely didn't say that in my version.
Oh, I don't doubt it, but that line resonated with me because I just found myself going, what a solid moniker, and what better person to say it, who comes up with these crazy plans where it's kind of like, hey, it's so crazy it might work. And sure enough, she hatches another crazy plan that, is kind of like, well, let's give it a shot. What is that plan? Okay, Shinji, you're going to run against the jet alone. Carry me in your hand. You're going to drop me in and then stop it. The nuclear reactor might go off, but your armor will take it.
Right. And he's like, no.
Yeah, he's like, this is a really bad idea. And she goes, I don't care. We're going to do it because it's all we have.
Yeah.
And it's just cool because the guy she's asking for this master code from is like calling his bosses, trying to get approval. They're out golfing.
His boss is like, call the other boss. And then he calls the other boss and they're like, oh, I'm golfing.
Can you submit a formal written request?
Right.
And he's like, no. And so then after Misato hatches this whole plan, he goes, the code is hope.
Right.
Was that the same code for you? Okay. I was worried. I was not worried. Well, worried and curious if they changed it.
It's like,
but
the code was poop in mine.
Yeah. Which I think is kind of a cool touch because it breaks down that kind of dickish exterior this guy gave.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, they're all there for the same reasons, maybe, to save humanity and find a way to fight the angels. And so...
Sure.
Then it cuts to this plan kicking into action, despite Shinji's cries of, this is crazy!
It was kind of like sentimental moment, actually, because at first Shinji's like, it's way too dangerous.
Yeah.
Talking about Misato.
Going in.
And she's like, no, you'll be fine. And he's like, I know, but you won't be.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like, it's my job. I live life with no regrets, so here we go.
Yeah, just kind of very, like you said, sentimental. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's a nice little additional, tick of the box that Shinji genuinely cares for Misato, and vice versa, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like, earlier in the season, he might have been too much of a bitch to speak up and say something. Mm-hmm. And, like, it shows that he not only is he growing, but that he's getting more confident enough to, like, say, almost like, let me handle this.
Yeah. Like, I don't want you to put yourself in harm's way.
Not that you can't handle it, but right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is interesting because she's been the one that has to essentially say, get in the robot, dude. Like, you need to do your job.
I know.
Nice little flip of the script, if you will. So then it cuts to what is probably my favorite animated sequence of all Evangelion. And it's the Eva chasing after the jet alone.
Yeah.
And the jet alone is flopping its arms like...
Yeah.
Like a middle schooler running the mile.
Right.
And the Eva is just kind of like very stiffly running after it.
Yeah.
It looks so goofy, dude. It looks goofy, but then like once it zooms in, it's all well and good. But I just was like, seeing that again. It's been like a good minute since I've rewatched this, but that scene made me crack up even the first time I watched it because it's goofy looking.
I just kind of felt like the jet alone is so stupid, anyways, that like of course nobody bothered to see if it would look cool. You know?
Yeah, because, they were like, we're not going for aesthetics. We're just trying to save the world.
Right.
But it still looks goofy as
hell.
hell.
Yeah, it does.
So then, cuts to Shinji catching up. He drops Misato in the hatch.
She almost falls to her death.
But luckily, really good at climbing ladders, which is great. Then Shinji gets in front, holds the jet alone back. She crawls in, goes to use the code HOPE. It doesn't work.
Not the right password.
You didn't say the magic word.
Yeah, you didn't say the magic word.
And just kind of when all hope is lost, Misato decides to go ahead and push the cooling rods in. Mechanically operated.
Yeah.
Heavy as fuck.
Yeah.
She just starts shoving. She's like, well, this is kind of all we got.
Last ditch effort.
And pulls it off. Absolutely mental.
Crazy, the power of women, man.
Yeah. Take that, men.
Dude, there was you know how like a bunch of like steam is coming out of the jet alone?
Yeah.
At first I'm like, oh, like it's working. Like its cooling vents have opened or something.
Yeah.
No, that means it's burning.
Yeah.
That's like
And I love how Shinji was playing whack-a-mole trying to cover up like, no, stop.
Yeah.
No, stop.
He needed another hand.
He did. He only had two.
Yeah.
But, Misato shoves the cooling rods back in.
Yep.
Forces the jet alone into a shutdown. And Shinji's like, oh my god, you did it! Holy, wow. And it's kind of just like, I can't believe it worked. Way to go. And then Misato drops this line where she goes, yeah, it worked, but this feels a little bit too intentional.
Right.
To, like, have happen. Which makes me wonder, and we kind of get an answer to this, but, like, Misato is the captain. How much does she know? She clearly knows enough.
Yeah, she knows enough, but she's not high tier enough to know what was actually happening here.
And who is high tier enough, you ask? Well, cut to the next scene where it's Ritsuko, Gendo, and is it like Gendo's right-hand man?
Yeah.
Whatever. But Ritsuko goes, despite Katsuragi's efforts, I'd say the special project, worked just as we intended.
Went off without a hitch, yeah.
And so then I'm like, oh my god, if Misato didn't jump in and save the day, were they just going to let a nuclear reactor blow up and kind of just go, oh, looks like the Avas are the best?
Yeah, it's really tough to... Because on the surface, it's like, well, perfect. Misato jumped in there. Somebody shut it off. Obviously, somebody that's working under the surface with Nerve.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yeah, they planned it like that. But unless they knew that Misato was going to do that, I don't know what their plan was. Because it makes Nerve look really good.
Yeah.
That Misato went in there, and as far as the public knows, she saved the day.
Oh, yeah. But I think the hindsight of that, though, is Nerve still would have looked good. The goodness, though, is just framed in a much better light because Misato of Nerve stepped up to save the day. Right. But regardless, Nerve would have looked good because then this other competitor to the Ava literally blew up like a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I'm sure that, that's what Ritsuko means, where despite Katsuragi jumping in, the special project went off without a hitch.
Yeah.
Which bums me out because I like Ritsuko, but now it's obvious that she's in cahoots.
Yeah, she's intertwined in this deeper, more selfish plot.
Yeah. But that feeling of ominous dread about whatever's happening behind the scenes is short-lived, because you get that just cute little send-off where, it's like, aw, Shinji and Misato are like family.
Yeah, I know. That's where Toji and all those guys are once again giving him hell that he has a hot roommate.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like, God, why do you guys want to live with her? Like, she's such a slob. She's dirty. She's horrible. And they're like, yeah, but like, she's herself around you.
Yeah,
and
you get to see a side of her that she wouldn't show anybody else, especially not us.
Right.
And then, is it Toji that's like, yeah, that kind of makes you guys like family.
Yeah, and that was really cool.
And then just seeing Shinji's face kind of light up, considering the phrasing of that, and his obvious want to be like, a part of something bigger than himself. And I say that, and it's interesting because I've heard discussions where people go, Shinji just wants to like belong, but why can't he just be satisfied with piloting a robot? And I think it goes back to that idea of Shinji is so much more than someone you just look at and go, get in the fucking robot. He has needs, just like a regular person does. And I think that, different people put different weight of importance on certain things. But for Shinji, I think he puts a lot of weight on belonging and wanting to find, like, you hear him say it in Unfamiliar Ceilings, where he goes, it's okay, like, I'm used to not having a home. Well, he has a home. It's alright, like, my dad fucking hates me. I hate myself. And now, you have friends at school. He's bonded with Rei. Like, Misato acts as a mentor, but is also someone he can banter with.
Right.
So it's kind of like all these pieces of the puzzle are fitting together in a very cool way. And I think Shinji's little, like grin, just kind of realizing that, wow, I really do have all of that.
Yeah.
Just a very, very nice way to tie a bow on this episode.
I like that sort of home feeling for Shinji much better than the episode 4 one. And the reason that I still look back at the episode 4 scene on the train where Misato and Shinji have that kind of long gaze at each other. And I guess the problem I have with that is that at that point in time, I don't feel like Nerve deserved Shinji. And I felt like him saying I'm home didn't really sit with me because like they haven't done shit for him except use him. Mm-hmm. So he's just so desperate that he says that. Mm-hmm. But now, like, 4 episodes later, 3 episodes later, however long it is, I do feel like at least he has a home with Misato. Like I think she is looking out for his best interest.
I think that's a good point. I would say though, and this is me going back to episode 4, I don't think him saying he's home isn't him saying he's home at Nerve. But for the first time, he has friends. He has people that like have a vested interest in him. Mm-hmm. And he has that in Misato, Kensuke, and Toji. And I think Shinji isn't one to want for much, and I think that alone created a, wait for it.
Oh, God.
Anchor.
No.
Created some kind of, foundation. And I think that now we're seeing you can't build a house without a foundation.
Your analogies are just... No,
I've been watching a lot of Hallmark movies. So
have you? It is the season.
But I don't know.
I really liked this ending. This felt right to me is my point there.
Yeah.
This felt like it made sense. It was earned. And I'm happy for him.
Hell yeah.
I'm
happy for him too. And I
have a couple loose ends that I wanted to...
Let's hear them.
...bring up. One thing I really liked about this episode is that it brings up, like, old Tokyo and...
Oh, yeah.
Tokyo 2 and Misato talks about how, like, when they're on their way to old Tokyo, they're, like, on the train, and she's like, man, crazy that, like, they used to have tons of trains and buses and stuff here, and now it's a freaking ghost town,
Yeah, all we have is this giant megadome.
Yeah, that makes me excited to find out exactly what happened to Tokyo before they had to make these, like, underground Tokyo 1, 2, 3, 4, however many, right?
Yeah.
So that was really interesting to me. They also mention a new mech arriving from Germany. They don't say mech. I forget what they say, but
Ava.
Arriving
a new
from Germany.
Ava unit and the third pilot.
And my whole thought there was, classic. Japanese and Germans back at it again. You know what I mean?
We're getting the band back together.
The 2015, nothing's changed. They're back up to their old ways, and Gendo's running the whole show. And so, not surprised by that move at all.
And classic, the U.S. is holding out.
Right. They're like, U.S., can you guys help us? No. Okay, Germany? Yes, they'll help us immediately.
And now the U.S. is just absolutely screwed.
Yeah.
That is a good point, though. I didn't ever think about that.
That's the deeper meaning behind this. This
is actually about World War II.
This is a World War II commentary. I actually... when I have a couple things on the elevator conversation where they're talking about the second impact or the first impact or whichever. They're just talking about all impacts.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff there because Ritsuko is saying a lot of things and Misato is kind of like biting her lip.
Yeah.
Like she's kind of biting her tongue. Like she wants to speak out, but she's not. She looks kind of pissed.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I almost felt like she knows the truth. And that told me, as first-time viewer, that maybe what Ritsuko's telling Shinji isn't the whole truth.
Yeah.
And she knows it, and she's pissed that,
they
have to keep that from him.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a really good point, because on the escalator, she's just kind of looking off into the distance and has kind of checked out of what Ritsuko's saying.
Yeah. That scene ends with Ritsuko being like, by the way, I heard something was taking place tomorrow. Like, kind of nudge to Misato, and she's like, okay.
Yeah. Very interesting. Like, and that's a good catch.
Quick, short response where she's obviously kind of pissed.
One thing I liked, too, is on that elevator, they talk about money. They talk about how they're currently in the process of repairing Ava 1. And they're like, we're kind of hitting the tops of our, auxiliary budgets here.
Yeah.
And then she goes, well, we have a third Ava unit on the way. And they're like, do we even have the money to repair that? And she goes, no, but we'll get more funding,
Right.
Like, these people can't afford to be stingy when we're, saving them.
Sure. It's almost like, the pencil pusher accountants that Misato knows of. Yeah, they clearly don't have the budget for that. But the underground money coming in.
Yeah.
They definitely have the money for that.
Oh, they've got the dough.
Right.
And I just kind of like, and this ties back to, I think, what we were talking about in episode 4. I love when they dive into the logistics of this. This is an operation, and just to hear them talk about, we're going to need money to repair that, and this was the cost of this. Having such real numbers and like data attached to things in a giant robot mech anime is very just cool to me, because it just gives it just enough brevity and weight. Like there's a level of grounding. Obviously it's we're fighting angels and there's Avas and the world's gonna explode or whatever, like the second impact. But then they're like, what's our supply chain looking like? How are we gonna get How are we gonna get more armor plating? It's just a nice nice little anecdote kind of thrown into the mix of, so Shinji, you're gonna kill this angel, and like, I don't know, very very cool.
No, I agree. The last thing that I had kind of in my final breadcrumbs that I wanted to clean up here is, they talk about this idea that when they find this humanoid in Antarctica that they deem as the first angel, in Ritsuko's telling of this.
Yeah.
And they go to find that. And obviously everything goes wrong.
Very wrong.
We don't know the details of that. She purposefully spared the audience the details of why it exploded
Meanwhile,
or what happened.
Misato's like, I'll sing it.
Right. But, like, all we do know is now the angels are back and they want revenge or something, right? So I guess, like, my thought on that is just, this is kind of classic, like, humans generally fear what we don't understand, right? And, like, in a lot of times with, like, alien movies or, like, superhero movies or whatever it might be, that thing that's not understood easily, we take as a threat. And so I almost wonder if this, just like 1.1% not human was different enough that whatever Nerve did, or maybe Nerve wasn't even around, but whoever did something to cause this angel to explode, caused some sort of rift that creates this revenge war that the angels are waging on Japan. And I have no idea why, but it just kind of highlighted that thought that, humanity generally fears what they don't understand. And maybe this didn't have to be this way, but it is due to the first impact or the second impact or whatever.
Yeah, and now it's just kind of really snowballing.
Right.
Just as each of these angels appear, it just feels like the stakes get raised higher and higher. And,
right. So, yeah, anyways, that's kind of my new running theory. That there's something to do with that impact where something went wrong. And now my main question I want to know is what exactly happened to cause that explosion that was so massive that, the textbooks are saying that all the weather changed and now we have to have 4 Tokyos. And,
And instead it's like, sounds like something a little more serious happened.
Yeah.
But yeah,
a lot of good stuff.
I think those are good breadcrumbs to keep your eye on.
Yeah. So just like you said at the top of the show, I mean, a lot of exposition happened in this, but it was done in between a lot of like charming scenes and really interesting scenes, and it was done in a way where it didn't feel like a dump. Where I didn't feel like I was just being told the plot.
Yep.
I felt like they were leading me on a trail that I could follow, or I could question everything.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I feel like they're not quite giving us everything.
Yeah. Well, and it was also Misato's crazy plan too, Electric Boogaloo.
Exactly.
Where just back at it again with the Hail Mary play, and it worked out.
Yeah,
so.
It was good to see her in the suit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But yeah, so okay, final closing thoughts. What would you rate this out of 10 mechs?
I would give this 8 out of 10 mechs.
Yeah, I agree. I
like this episode.
I think 8 out of 10 is a good spot to put it at.
Yep.
Because kind of like you said, good exposition, doesn't overstay its welcome. You still get kind of a high-octane action thing, and you get really sweet character moments between Shinji, Misato, Kensuke, and Toji. So.
Yep, I liked it.
Yeah. Well, hey, this has been another episode of the HiroBabble podcast. Tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your dad, tell your dog, stream us, listen to us, and leave a comment. Tell us your thoughts on episode 7. Let us know what you thought. And yeah, until next time, we're out.